missing here? Oh, you. There we go. All right. Good morning. Good morning, good morning. Getting revved up. All right, let's jump into this thing. So I need to finish up this area here, touch this up, and let's do some general touch-ups, and then we'll be done. So I'll push this back out of the way if I can move this a little bit. Alright. I wanted to lighten up some of these crevasses in here. These reading glasses on so I can see what I'm doing in these smaller spots. Quiet morning today. That's better. That feels better. Oh, much ink. Yeah. Good morning. Got our first dot that we're going to deal with. Hiding a box. Poof. Good morning. Quiet this morning. Must be Wednesday. All right. Good morning. Good morning. All right, I need to focus on this area down here. Just kind of touch up a few things I spotted up at the top. I basically need to get this thing painted in there a bit. Ugh. Good morning. Rotate this around a bit. Try to catch some of these angles more easily. A little janky up there. I'll restart that computer at some point. Good morning. All right. Let's see. So that's going to come down. Trying to mirror the thing I've got up here into the ground. I mirrored that up top first, but I realized I needed to do this first before I did that. So just this in so exactly where it's going to fit. Trim that back a little bit. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Hope you don't mind the diagonal view here. Just trying to It's easier to paint at a certain angle sometimes. A little Bashi seep in there. I'm going to pull that out a little bit for you. It's a little bit small. Let me put you back. There you go. There's more room. Not better? A little bit? Yeah? My poor dog. It's like my bed had slipped under the thing and I can't get in it. Oh, let's see, that needs to come all the way over there. So. Get this more sideways. Just make sure I'm seeing this more correctly. I'm trying to put this reflection of this thing into that spot. So. Good morning. It doesn't need to put the reflection of this in here before. Yeah, well, you gotta, it takes practice, right? If you try something once, usually it doesn't work out very well, right? That tends to be the case in most circumstances. So, I wouldn't be too worried until you start done like 30 or 40 or 100 of them. Then maybe you start to worry, like maybe this isn't for me. I don't know. Yeah, but I would definitely do a ton of those if you're. Yeah, it takes practice, right? So, Gil, what's his face? You know, I spent a lot of time doing a lot of paintings. Master copies, I think, are a really helpful way of working. And actually, one thing, if you're trying to like practice just the color, like it's okay. I think if you're just practicing on color, like if that's what you're focusing on right now, I think it's okay to trace as a way of like getting to the color. You obviously need to keep practicing your drawing, but you can do what's called intelligent tracing. I haven't really done it very often, but basically you try to pay attention to how you draw when you trace, and that can help you kind of get to the painting a little bit faster. It's too late. Yeah, painting black and white is also a good idea. You can practice your drawing, your edges. Edges are a big deal in painting, like managing how edges interact with each other. I think I want this object gets further away in the reflection. I want it to soften it over to so it doesn't show up quite as strong. Yeah, grayscale is really good. If you want even like a simpler palette, just using like a red and a black and white can work too. Better. Chalky, uneven texture. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. I mean, gouache is going to be actually has chalk in it, so you're going to expect a certain. It's not going to be as um, it's not going to. It's going to be opaque. It's like that's part of how it works. Um, it could be again, it could be like if you're dealing with low quality gouache paint, that can be an impact on it as well. Um, so that's something to kind of be just aware of with gouache, that it is more transparent. And then also, if again you're using cheaper stuff, that might be the reflection of the manufacturing quality that you're dealing with. Um, So it depends on those couple of things. Oh, I appreciate that. Hope you don't mind it being sideways for a bit. I'm trying to work on these lines this way. It's just a little bit easier to paint this direction. I'm just trying to bring it mostly to a finish if I can today. Yeah, so say I'm working on a little. It's an acrylic painting that I'm working on here. Been working on it for a long time actually. I'm probably about 25-ish hours into it. All right, so this is going to be there. I'm going to rotate this. Working on this reflection here. Yeah, trying to do a little bit different things. So wish art streams were a little more popular on these streaming platforms, unless you happen to be look really good, not wearing much clothing, or you got some kind of VTuber thing going on. Then you're not going to get as much attention, I guess. Or there's something I'm not doing that I should be doing. Of course, the top-rated, I noticed looking at that the other day, the most popular one on Twitch is Bob Ross. And they're really just like replaying his old shows. Um, what's my motivation? It's just things I want to do. Stories I want to tell. I enjoy the medium. I like working with the medium. But there's just things I want to do. Like I enjoy the process of painting. So like, when I sit down to paint, especially once I kind of get focused in on it. Like it just feels really, really good to focus and work on the picture. And I'm excited about what's possible in the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and then all that's kind of very exciting for me. So. Um, so that's a big part of it. Is I just really enjoy the process. It's like I enjoy the craft of the work. That extends to actually other things too. So it's not just making art, but like actual making of other things. Like I have this Xterra project I did where I converted my Nissan Xterra into a um, camper, and I got really into that project for like a couple of years. I almost stopped basically doing regular painting and drawing to work on it because it required all of my focus. So that's part of it. There's also like having stories you want to tell, or there's just things you really enjoy like looking at, and you want to share with other people that experience things that you enjoy. Um, showing off the world you'd like to live in, or the things you'd like to exist in the world. And art's a wonderful vehicle for doing that because it doesn't require, especially painting and drawing, it doesn't require a big studio. It doesn't require 1,000 people working on it. It's just you doing your thing, and so that can be like a really nice thing to do. Is just being able to do that. Or you look around the world and you're like, oh, like you've read like a comic book or saw a movie or played a game. You're like, I think if it had been done this way, or if they'd made this kind of choice, then I would have liked it even more. And that's often a strong motivator for making art because suddenly you're like, oh wait, I can do that to some degree, right? Like you can make things happen in your pictures, that maybe you can't change in the world, but you can change in your work, or something you feel like is underappreciated or should be done or is possible, but you don't see anybody doing it. That's like a good motivator. But I enjoy the whole thing. Like people often ask me, in here, I think maybe you've asked recently, or somebody asked the other day, but it's like, what's your favorite part? And like, I just really enjoy the whole process. I look forward to the next step. I look forward to I enjoyed the previous ones, and so and then when I get done with the picture, I look forward to the next one. Sometimes I get tired or whatever, but that's different than losing motivation. But it again depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Like some people, their motivation in art is just to, like get a job. I've always thought that wasn't the best motivation, not because it's incorrect, but it's just like if you're just looking for a job, there are many careers in this world that are simpler, more straightforward, easier. There's more of those jobs, and it just seems like if you're just doing this to get a job, then I think you're going to find it's just there's much easier ways of making a living. But if it's built into you to like to want to do this professionally and put your stuff out there in the world, and like this is the thing that you feel a compulsion to do it, then you definitely should, and find your own path for it. But there's a lot of enjoyment in mastering the technical skills. There is a lot in that because it's an accomplishment. It's a visible accomplishment sitting on the surface of a piece of paper. It's accomplishment brought into reality that's sitting there right in front of you, and that's exciting too, right? So it's not like there's other accomplishments you can get where you get a trophy or you get a commendation, but the accomplishment is gone, right? The achievement has disappeared into the void. But with art, with making objects like this, like your accomplishment is right there, right? So this, my accomplishment, like the things that I'm learning, getting better at here. I don't think this is perfect by any means, but the things that I'm trying to improve are coming along. I think okay, and um, these will sit here in this book or on a wall or wherever I put them as a reminder that this was something that I did, that I accomplished, that I made possible for myself. And that's another kind of a nice thing about art. Um, so when I was 24, let's see, that would be actually about when I was finishing up with school, with my university. So I was starting to be a professional at that point. Um, or maybe I was still in school. But yeah, so I took a little bit longer to get through university. It wasn't because I failed or anything. I had some breaks in there for different things, but I always like to tell students, it's like I almost think that a lot of students actually shouldn't go to university until their mid-20s. I think they should go out there and try things in the world and do other things. I don't know, military service is a good idea, but a lot of countries require that at a certain age. But I do think people should go out into the world before they go into school. A bit. Yeah. So again, but I usually, because usually what happens is, I've noticed like students when if they leave and come back after a time period, and or they start late. Usually they come in like with a much stronger work ethic. They have a lot more clarity on the things that they want to accomplish, and they're willing to put in more time. One of the things that people talk about, like a lot of trends that they see in students or young people or whatever, and the one that I kind of notice is there seems to be a casualness to their education. That's the one that concerns me the most. So I'll see people in my department meetings. They'll talk about kind of superficial effects of that. So they'll talk about what's happening, what they're seeing in their classes, like people aren't spending enough time, or they're not doing this thing or that thing or this other thing. Like sketchbook gets brought up a lot. I actually see a lot of sketchbook stuff from students, a lot more than I would think so. But or the other people anticipate seeing. But the again, the thing that I see as being an issue really is I see kind of this general casualness, and also sometimes I'll hear it from pros. Like there's a professional concept artist; she's really good. Like she's amazing. Like she came out when she was first putting her stuff up online. Like just came out of the gates running really hard. Like she's just doing really incredible stuff. And now she's saying, "Well, I wish I hadn't worked so hard in my 20s. I missed out on blah 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 and this and that." I'm like, well, sure, maybe that's true for you. I don't know. I don't know your exact circumstances, but I know for sure that you would not be as popular and successful as you are had you not done that. And to tell people to more casually relate to their artistic development is, I think, generally a mistake, because most people they hear that, and usually they're the people that aren't working hard as it is, and they'll kind of use that as an excuse to not crank and work really hard. Because if you're in your 20s, you're going to have more energy now than you will ever have in your entire life. You'll have more focus later, but you'll have more energy and more resilience to stress than you'll have later in life. you'll be able to recover from putting yourself through difficult things more easily. Late nights and intensive projects and long hours. You're just going to be able to recover a lot more easily from those things when you're younger. And we live a long time now. That's one of the challenges we kind of face as a society in general, is that all of us are living well beyond what's anticipated from the structures we have assembled as a society. And starting to see some of the they've been talking about it for a long time, but we're kind of starting to see some of those ramifications of it, like a lot of the housing prices being so high. But part of that is, my parents' generation, the boomers, they're living a long time. They're quite literally, lasting 20 years beyond, say, where their parents were at in a lot of cases. And it's good for them. Hopefully, I'll last even longer than that. I don't want anyone to die, but our structures aren't built for that. Have a good one. Sorry about didn't look up the chat there for a bit. But yeah, so that's some of the challenges that we have to deal with, and whether we recognize it or not, it matters a lot. And kind of have to deal with it. But yeah, so I think people shouldn't be in such a hurry to push into their education as much as they have historically. Oof. Here. That feels much better. I appreciate that. Thanks for coming in. Yeah, just working on bringing this to the close. better. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming in. Sorry, I just trying to focusing on these final details. So it's always really intense when I do that. It feels like, whew. You know, getting that stroke to just follow that curve really well. You know, cleaning things up and trying to make things work. It just get to you sometimes. Yeah, I've been using digital media since like 2002, 2001, something like that. When I got my first computer or my first Wacom tablet when I was at university, and but my university program is kind of a mix of both analog and digital media. Mostly analog. My professors were all traditional illustrators for magazines and book covers and children's books, print publication. But I taught myself a lot of digital stuff. I did have a digital class, um, but but so I've worked in games and illustration, doing a lot of digital stuff, but I've always kept up with analog media. This is actually a medium that I avoided for a very long time. So I used acrylic in school, but I did not like it at all. I've talked about this in here before while I've been working on these things. Like I did not like acrylic. I liked oil painting. I liked gouache, watercolor to a certain degree, but acrylic painting was not something I ever wanted to mess with. I did not like it. And then I had to do a class last semester, and I had to use it because we couldn't use oil paints in the classroom. So I was like, all right, so I'll use acrylic. And I did a couple things in there that I liked. And I was like, oh. And I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, maybe my problem was when I was a student using it in like 2002, that maybe, just maybe, I sucked at painting back then. And I kind of realized I was like, well, maybe I just sucked at painting. And acrylic, I think, isn't going to ever be my favorite, but I feel like it's something I wanted to get good at, and I feel like these are coming along okay. I think, in retrospect, I should have gone with the soft body acrylics. I have a bunch of heavy body, which is a thicker acrylic paint, and I assumed that the heavy body stuff was just thicker because there was more paint in it, but it turns out that's wrong. So, so I think I'm going to gradually replace these with soft body acrylic paints as I use them up. Um, but so um, Well, nowadays, with scanning technology, it's a lot easier, right? You get a decent scanner, and stitch things together, or a digital to camera, as long as you know how to take pictures properly of your work, which is not that hard to do. You just have to kind of set up a proper lighting situation, and um, so I've shifted over to doing a lot more analog media recently. Like I'm working on some character designs, and I'm using tracing paper and whatnot for this comic project that I'm working on. And people talk, we look at how expensive computers are going to get too with all this AI nonsense going on. And it could be cheaper just to do things analog. Um, Computers are only sort of cheaper because they're cheaper in the sense that you do a big upfront expense and then you don't think about it for a long time. Where with like traditional media, it probably costs a little bit more in the long term, but I think there's a couple things that you get out of it. One, you get like a real piece of work, right? You get a real physical, tangible art piece, um, and then that you can then sell. And and I think a lot of the speed issues around art is one of the things that I think has harmed a lot of projects. The ability to make something that looks reasonable very, very quickly. That efficiency argument, I think, has also been somewhat destructive. So that's something to consider, right? Um, so I think there's a lot of good reasons to use regular, real media, as it were. But like there's a lot of interesting new media out there, like the markers that you can get, the acrylic markers. I've got a set of those I want to play with next. But there's a lot to say for it. And yeah, so I think some of the expense issues that people have with like traditional media. I'm using these reading glasses um, recently just because I'm trying to see these finer details. Because this picture's not very big, right? It's like 8 inches by 8 inches approximately. It's on a 9 by 12 sheet of paper with that, taped off a little bit. That's weird. Shuffle play, and it's just like didn't play anything. But so and I look at like there's major properties that use in concept art in traditional media. Like the guy Nicolas Marley. He does basic tools to create his his stuff for How to Train Your Dragon and. But like if you're trying to send an original piece to the other side of the world, yeah, that's going to be more expensive. But again, if they're just buying, like they would with a digital piece, you're not sending the original digital piece, right? So you would just keep the painting, and then send them the digital version of that. Scan it in, and send it to them. So that's kind of a way to work with that if you're sending stuff around, or you just factor that into the cost. Like you're getting a physical piece of art. If you want this in Indonesia or Europe or the United States or wherever you're sending stuff, that just gets factored into the cost. We bring stuff, physical media if you do a comic convention or art convention or whatever. That's going to be way more interesting to more people than digital prints of the original file. And you can still sell the digital prints too, right? So I think there's a lot to consider. I don't know what everyone should do necessarily, but it's. I think there's just a lot to be said for kind of shifting our focus back to analog media. I actually kind of hate the word traditional in the sense that because you can use physical analog media in non-traditional ways, in terms of, like, if you're talking about traditional, like, usually you're referring to some kind of specific practice related to a medium. So, like, there's things I'm doing in here that would be considered, I would consider traditional. So they would be old master techniques like scumbling and glazing, or impasto. That would be what I would consider traditional. Makes more sense to me. Whereas saying, like, acrylic has a very limited tradition all by itself, right? So it's only been around for about 100 years. And in fact, the older stuff, like, it's had a lot of issues. Like, it would rot very easily. And so even, like, the modern stuff is only like 30 years old or 50 years old or whatever. But it's not necessarily what I would call traditional in that sense of so I always think it's an interesting way to use it because it gets used in the common vernacular. It's like some people will call a time lapse a speed paint, right? Where a speed paint is really you painting as fast as you can to get it done very, very quickly, usually in one sitting. So it's similar to like an alla prima type thing. Whereas a time lapse is a sped up version of something, but people will say speed paint when they mean time lapse. So there's a lot of, like, weird use of terminology in art stuff that I do not approve of. They need to run these terms by me before they start using them. I think that should be the rule, if there is a rule. Gotta check in with me. They never do, so I don't know what's going on out there. But yeah, so I definitely encourage people to kind of reevaluate their relationship with their media. We have seen, like, some interesting, even in, like, the popular media, people shifting to a certain degree. If you look at, like, Lucasfilm, some of their recent media stuff, they're doing a lot more with puppets and real sets and real props, and they are using, of course, CGI with these, like, but they're trying to use more and more kind of older methods. Then I think they're looking back and like, well, what did we lose out on? What did we throw out that we should have kept? So I know, like, in one of the recent shows, they did, like, actual hand painted backgrounds. So they weren't digital matte paintings; they were actually physical matte paintings. I was thinking that kind of Treasure Island based show that they did with, like, little kids for Star Wars. And I think it makes a difference. I was talking to one guy that I worked with who worked in Hollywood, and he was saying, "Oh, no, that doesn't make any difference at all. Like, people have objectively done this thing or that thing in a film with green screens and balls on a stick to pay attention to a thing." And I'm like, you don't think that, like, holding a prop gun that feels heavy, that lights up, that the thing clicks when you squeeze the trigger makes a difference? You don't think walking into a set that looks like the real place you're supposed to be in, like, doesn't make a difference for how someone responds and innately to the scene? He's like, no, I don't think there's any difference. Okay, I kind of think otherwise, but you're the Hollywood guy, but I think it makes a difference. I hope. Seems like it would to me, but it's like if you're wearing the. I noticed even with Avatar, so everything's CGI, right? Only sort of. They did build like partial sets and partial costumes for the actors to wear when they were doing their Smurf act on the set, acting together with other people, and yeah, I haven't watched the movie. I don't have any particular interest in the Avatar films. I saw the first one in IMAX when I was in grad school in New York, but had no interest in ever kind of rewatching those movies ever again. Maybe I should put them on, but I kind of looked at the commercials. Like, this don't seem very good. But even those films, James Cameron sees them. They're wearing partial costumes. They're wearing the headdresses or the jewelry because it makes a difference for how they move, right? They have the jewelry on. It's going to affect how the characters move when they're doing their motion recording stuff, right? Because it impacts how their head is weighted and the things move around in between their limbs or whatever. Like it makes a difference. I think seems like it to me. And one of the nice things about working with analog media like this is it kind of forces you to make choices, whereas with like digital media, you kind of have to you can make infinite choices, right? So that can actually be a problem all by itself, where you can go down an infinite number of avenues, which means you avoid making a choice. One of the other things that I've been looking at lately is there's this idea of haptic connection. So basically, the physical act of touching the surface with this brush is very different if I was using a different brush or a different medium, or if I was using a pencil or a different type of hair on the brush. Right? There's a bunch of different varieties of touch. Whereas if I'm using this guy right here, it doesn't matter if I'm using an airbrush or a paintbrush or a pen brush or whatever digital brush is in there. They're all exactly the same in terms of how it feels when I touch the screen. I guess at least with the Apple Pencil, you can rotate it sideways, right, and draw that way. But you think about my Wacom stylus. It's over here next to my Cintiq. Like that plastic tip, and you can change the tips, but that plastic tip is really the only sensory, the only haptic connection I have to the surface. And so, it doesn't matter if I'm using ZBrush or I'm working in Blender or Photoshop or Corel Painter or whatever, Krita, Clip Studio, and whatever brush I'm using or tool I'm using, they all feel exactly the same. And they've kind of found that the more you vary the haptic experience of the actual touch experience, like I'm painting right here, I have to use like a really, really soft touch to get the paint to sit just right, as opposed to a different kind of touch I might use. But I have to use like this very soft touch, and I can barely sense, the brush moving on that surface. It creates connections in my brain when I do that. It creates new connections. Basically, it makes you smarter because you have a more varied experience that you're adapting to. And because of that varied experience, again, your brain is having to try out different things. It's one of the reasons why people like to dump on sports people, and I don't really watch or care about sports all that much, and I'm not very sporty. But the argument, is like, oh, well, they're dumb or whatever. It's not really true. Like, they have a different type of set of connections that they're making within their brain. It's not the same as, say, doing physics or rocket science or whatever, but they are developing the intelligent response of their body's interactions with the world and the rule sets they deal with within a game. It's one of the reasons why video games, they're fine and all, but you really have limited connection to the game world, that haptic connection. It's one of the reasons that they've actually put those into games to a certain degree, right? So if your controller has a vibratory response, they're trying to engage different parts of your brain to make things feel different. So you're getting shot by something, or you're using a certain weapon or power or whatever. They're trying to kind of create stimulations in the haptic technology inside of the controller to give you a more varied experience, which makes it more interesting for you. So, it's not like I think digital art should go away per se. Though, I wouldn't be brokenhearted by that these days. I've done a ton of digital art. I've got a mural that's up in, or at least it was. I think they've been swapping them out since it was a long time ago. Almost 20 years ago when I was working on that. I finished working on that. So I've done a ton of art. I worked for video game companies, and I probably, if I was doing stuff for a video game company, I probably would do it all, on my iPad or whatever. But so I think AI is part of the reason why I want to do more of this, but I don't think it's the only thing. I think it did help me start thinking about things a little bit differently. The way people talk about what it's capable of and what it does, which it doesn't really do a lot of things that they say it does. The harm it causes people, because it reduces the experience to the output. And I kind of started to think, well, maybe the more algorithmic a process is, the less it engages you. So really when you're drawing on your computer, I usually think of it I like to think of it as drawing with light, as a comparison. So then here I'm drawing with physical media, but on the computer I draw with light, which I kind of still like the metaphor. But the thing is, you are ultimately drawing with ones and zeros, and most programs, they use some kind of repeating stamp that you can vary. But ultimately, it's going to be more similar in its results than the default settings of analog media. I see it all the time from students too, because they're like, well, it is easier. So I have depending on the course, I have an open media policy. They can use what they want, as long as they can fulfill the project with it. But that's kind of been sitting in my brain lately. I was thinking, well, maybe the more algorithmically based an art making process is, the more homogenized it really is. AI is the ultimate homogenizer, right? You basically, it can only look back, and so it basically, doesn't create anything new. It just remixes old stuff. People are like, well, that's creativity. That's how art making happens. Well, it's sort of. But the art making is also that interaction you have with your media, because it determines a lot of things about how you actually create things. There's things that you run into with the media that don't happen in any other media. And I think certainly there's things you can do digitally that you can't do with physical analog media. But I also kind of look at it and think, well, as I work on this painting, I bump into challenges that I can't really undo, or problems I can't easily dispose of because it's not on a layer or whatever. And I have to actually sit down and figure things out to a certain degree in ways that, I can circumvent with digital media. And this kind of got me thinking about a lot of this stuff as a way of talking about it. So it's not so much like you have to know the rules before you can break the rules kind of thing. Which I've never really liked that expression very much. It doesn't really make sense. In terms of art making, I don't really think there are rules per se. I like to think of them more as tools. So there's like certain results you're trying to derive. Usually there's kind of commonly understood ways of doing that, and that's kind of you might think of as a rule per se. But yeah, it kind of just the more I kind of look at what's going on with things, I just think, well, maybe I should focus a lot more on bringing real things into the world rather than just digital files. So, and if I'm going to spend a lot of time on something, I might as well spend a little bit more time using, making a real object in the real world. If I'm going to spend, 20 so I put about 20-ish hours into this picture, and maybe if I were doing it on the computer, I'd spend less time. Maybe I wouldn't. I can put a lot of time into a project. But it might take me a third less time or whatever to do things on the computer. But there's things you kind of discover as you're making a physical object that if you hurry, if you get rid of that kind of initial opportunity to lock into something like this and focus for an extended period of time, you kind of make discoveries in the making of things that you don't get if you circumvent that, if you hurry, and if you're just trying to get to the finish as quick as possible. It's like I noticed Ross Draws started posting again recently. He'd stopped posting a long time because he kind of embroiled himself in some controversies through his use of AI, namely, putting his friends' work into AI training and using it for himself. There's some other things that were going on too, but he's recently kind of popped up back online sharing some stuff. But he was talking about it, and I recall he's like saying this thing like, well, it seems like he didn't enjoy the process of making art very much. Like he seemed more interested in just getting that final result, hurrying to the end, rather than enjoying the making of things. And maybe he did before, but I think if you kind of look at his work, he kind of makes the same kind of picture over and over and over again. That would be tedious to me. Like it's kind of one of those artists where like I look at it and it's like, well, it's kind of like the images of people like the lights are on but nobody's home kind of pictures. And there's definitely a spot for that in the world, and he's definitely very skilled. But I could see losing interest. There's not like any psychological depth or inner life to the characters that he's developing. It's a lot of fan art and reworks of that kind of thing. And there's definitely, again, there's a spot for all of that stuff. But I should do fan art. I never do fan art. I should probably give that a go sometime. But yeah, but yeah, he got himself in some trouble. I think it's partially, I think just because he doesn't really enjoy or didn't. Maybe he does now. Maybe he's kind of figured it out. I don't know. Hopefully, it'd be good for him. What he actually likes about making art, and he can kind of lock in on that. Because I often get asked, like, what's your favorite part of making art? And I'm like, I enjoy the whole thing. I like the thumbnailing, I like the research, I like the ideation. Maybe I don't always enjoy getting, collecting or shooting reference. It could just take some time. Remember the awkward of like shooting pictures of myself. But yeah, I think if I got better at that, I'd probably like it more. So this seems to be greened up a little bit. Yeah, so I look at that and I don't know Ross draws well. I think I saw him once, like at Lightbox, walked around with his friends there, but I don't know him at all. I just hear what people, because he's popular, like pay attention to what's going on with popular people, so I can kind of understand people, what interests them and why. I think that's always useful information. This green is I would like. So I think it's always worthwhile. Like, why is something popular? Even if it's not something that I would necessarily like or enjoy, I think it's always worthwhile to examine what's popular in culture and to understand what's going on. I need to still finish watching it, but I haven't finished watching. What's that show? Demon Hunter. That K-pop Demon Hunters. That show. I understand it's really popular. I don't think it wasn't made for me per se, but I'd like to watch it just because I'd like to understand more about what makes it so popular for people. Like my nieces watch it over and over and over again, or have. And my students were really into it when it first came out. It was a big hit, and I think it's worth kind of some examination. Or it's like or in comic books right now, like the Absolute Batman series is very, very popular, and I don't particularly care about it. I've looked at it and I'm like, well, it just feels like it should have been like an independent comic book at Image or somewhere else, self-published thing. It's not really what we think of as Batman. It's a different kind of character. It's interesting in that way, but it seems like they could have developed it into something that they owned rather than something DC Warner Brothers owns, and benefited from that personally more than what they're getting paid for by DC. But I'm glad it's successful. So I picked up recent issues. This was mostly because of the Eric Kennedy art. I think he's really good, even though he works digitally. Which I thought was strange. And he's working on this Batman thing, and he's doing a digital one. It's like he could probably do a lot more money by doing it analog, because he could sell the originals. But he didn't ask me. I don't get. People keep doing all these things, and they never check in with me first. Even if they don't know me, never check in with me. It's bizarre. Be sure you always check in with me before you make decisions like that. I will make sure you have my opinion. But yeah, so I picked up his just because I like his art, and it's like his first return to really major comic stuff. And then I did pick up the graphic novel for it, and I can see the energy and everything in it. I think that's what people really like about it. I also bought the David Mazzucchelli Batman Year One graphic novel. It's interesting to compare the two together because they're so different from each other. But this Absolute Batman series has been a huge seller for like the last year and a half since it started coming out. And have a good one. But So yeah, I think it's definitely worth checking out if you haven't checked it out. Um, but it's just trying to like understand what people enjoy about it, because I think if I understand that, maybe I can do a better job of communicating what I'm doing to people in better ways. And just working on trying to touch this up so it's done. So, yeah, but yeah, so I'm just, I look around, I'm just trying to understand the stuff that's going on out there. This is feeling so much better. I was trying to get this projected on there, and then I realized like this would be mirrored in there before that would be mirrored in there because it's above that. And that's closer. So if that was going to be mirrored in here, it would actually be like way, way down below that. You got to obey the laws of physics to some degree in your paintings, right? Unless you're trying to make pictorial works. Yeah, so everybody check in with me before you have your own opinions. I'll make sure you're aligned correctly. I'm sure Scott Snyder and Nick Trigo want my opinion 100% of the time. Or not, probably. But and then let's see how we're doing for time. Hour 35, huh? It was good. I'm feeling better. I was feeling a little off this morning when I got up, so I was worried maybe I was getting sick or something, but I feel good now. A little black blob over there. Alright. Next up, we're going to touch up this tree branch. Well, I'm going to put some little highlights on her toes. Got some metal caps on them. Yes. Push that back up. Let's back in here, and then we're going to touch up this guy here. And then we'll look around. Maybe I'll take a little break and look. Oh man, taking the reading glass. The reason I wanted to get the reading glasses on here was I've been noticing a lot of eye strain lately when I draw or paint for extended periods of time, and I think as I was trying to like see, because I love details. I'm too much sometimes. So I think I over render things. Like there's some things in here I'm already seeing I can knock back a little bit. But I'm definitely a sucker for detail. So I want to get a little red into the border of that tree as some semi-subsurface scattering on there. Border of this tree, and I'll paint into that. But yeah, so I started wearing. I got these reading glasses. Actually, they're my dad's. He passed away in December, brain cancer. But my mom was like going through some of his stuff after the funeral and all that. She's like, "Hey, you should try these reading glasses. Could you use these?" Because I commented about the eye strain and that I was getting. I think they help, but when I take them off, if I've been using them for a while, it does kind of throw my vision off for a little bit. So, but I do think they help, especially on a small picture like this. It makes it look, a third larger, which is really really helpful for me. So, um, um, so yeah, it definitely helps when we're working on small pictures like this. I can kind of see. If I'm using a number one uh, round brush here, short handle. It definitely makes a difference for like coming in here and like working these edges really, really carefully. So it definitely helps me out. Um, it feels weird wearing them. I've never worn glasses like ever in my life. I've never had any need for them at all, except like sunglasses. As usual, anyone has comments or questions, let me know. I do not mind talking while working. I'm kind of used to it to a certain degree. I do have to focus some of the time, but because I'm a teacher, I get kind of used to saying things while I'm doing things. Actually, one of the funny things I'll see students do all the time is they'll paint trees brown. And trees are not brown. Well, not all trees are brown. Very few are, but it's always one of the little things I'm like, have you ever seen brown tree? And like redwoods are definitely brown. You know, some pine trees, but mostly trees are kind of gray. The trunks are, you know, the branches. There's variation in there, but yeah, they're really lean more gray than anything, and more silvery. Because what they're doing is they're reflecting the light. And so it's one of the most common mistakes I'll see with students. Like, they'd be looking at a reference of a tree and they'll paint it brown. And I'm like, do you see any brown on that tree? Like, is there any brown at all? And they'll be like, oh, there's no brown. Like, it blows their mind because they've never really paid that much attention to trees. And yeah, trees are usually silvery because they're reflecting light. They're trying to not absorb the heat and the light. You know, they save that for their leaves. They want to absorb the sunlight. But yeah, it's always a little funny thing when they look at it. It's like, hey, you're right. There's no trees are not brown for the most part. There's always exceptions, but they usually just paint like a regular tree thing. So yeah, these branches haven't really gotten very much attention since I started the painting. I've been working on kind of finishing as I go, which is the smarter route of doing things. You know, to bit of silver in my foot. If you pull the bark off, then the wood might turn brown. It's like, you know, walnut wood. You know, you buy it from a dealer, like you go to a hardwood store and you buy some walnut, like it'll be really dark and brown. That's because the bark's been pulled off of it, and all you got left is the wood. But everybody draws them brown when they first start. Green and gray. Yeah, so I think what I can probably do is finish touching up this here, and then probably mostly call it done. I might pull it out to tweak it. Like the guy over here on the left, I might tweak him a little bit. But I think we're almost done with this picture. That's what I wanted to get out of it anyway. But I think if I let it kind of sit for a bit, I can see what maybe I might be missing. Oh, my back. So I need to wear these while I'm working on this part. Alright, let's get some darks in here. And it's funny, people say you should never use black in shadows, paint shades. I'm like, well, it depends. But I do like to mix like the transparent red into my black paint. If using straight black paint. In this case, transparent oxide red and black. Clean up these edges a little bit in here. A little ambient occlusion spots. Thick. Just to fold over itself. Yeah, for those of you paying attention, there was actually some good news the other day with AI stuff. So basically, the Supreme Court refused to hear this case for copyrighting an AI-made image, and it was they were trying to get a reversal on another court and government copyright office decision. And so by the Supreme Court refusing to hear it, it means that that decision stands. So that's actually some good news. It doesn't mean that everything made with AI is not necessarily copyrightable, but it has to reveal significant human intervention. And the parts that are AI generated cannot be copyrighted. So like you could make a collage and you could copyright the collage, but you can't copyright the images you put in the collage, the generated images. And so there's kind of it's an important, but it seems small, but it's actually an important distinction in terms of legal pursuits. So like if you just like generate an image, like you can't throw it up and have it be copyrighted, or you make a book, right? And, you generate a book and you put it up on Amazon, like it's not copyrightable. Like the formatting or the chapter organization or things like that could be, if they're not generated, if they're created by you, like that could be copyrighted. But it just seems like a waste of time at that point, right? The whole point of the generative work is to remove the labor from the making of the art, and thereby, speeding up the instances of generative works. But I thought that was some really good news. But they refused to even talk about it. It's like, no, decision's already been made. It's fine. We don't want to talk about it. It's not important to us. So that was Monday. So, yeah, definitely worth checking that out if you haven't looked into that yet. But that should add a lot more to the good guy side of this whole thing, where artists want to make cool things. It doesn't get rid of everything, but it kind of points that there's not that much long-term viability in projects built on it. So, like, if they're putting generative works into a video game, the parts that are generated are not copyrightable. So, like, like Call of Duty's put images and things into their games. Maybe there's things in there that are related to brand that you can't mess with, but the actual copyrightability, the ability to exploit for yourself what's in there is no longer, from the generative side, is available. Good morning. Oh, it's a little flat there, so let's get some more tone. Form. Variation, so it'll even too. That's a little better. probably need to introduce a little bit of the orange tint on top of this in some spots just to reflect what's going on around it. Sometimes I put a little detail there, but it's actually on top of the tape. It's not going to be there when I'm done. It's better there. What do we think so far? We about almost ready to be done. Get this cleaned up and not just yet, but close. Let's see, how's this burnt orange? A little bit of shininess, right? Not too much. But just some reflections from above. Integrate this in. Good morning. And just let me know if there's any questions or comments out there. I'm just trying to touch up some little spots on here. Things probably no one would ever notice but me. But you know, that's how I roll with it. Try not to overfocus my eyes, keep them relaxed. Right. Let's do some blue spots. Good morning. Just, touching some stuff up here. Pause. What do we think? Are we about done? Make some notes and update the one over here on the left a little bit, update this one a little bit. But I think pretty close. Branches up here. I haven't touched these a lot either, so just a little bit of attention. Better tonal structure. Usually plotting I put in there. Quite a bit darker. Well, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. These ones a little bit of green or something like that. Let's see, is that dark enough? Let's see. These edges right here, just like a switch. Alright. It's always something, right? They say a painting is never finished, it is abandoned. Some a little more halo orange on top of her head. here, catching some more of this. I was thinking I was focusing on light coming out of here, but there's some stuff coming from above that I should probably factor in. About that. Split the hair, get some. How's that look ahead? Alright, comes up. White and that skull just a little bit on top. Oops, almost picked it up. It's a little sticky. All the layers of glazing medium on top will take a while for it to dry 100%. Plus it is film acrylic, so it's kind of plasticky as it is. Finally, is our tip. Here. Easing up on those edges. That's where it's where the details happen, right? Just trying to sweep in. Let's turn just a little bit better. A little bit of a glow. Just a little bit of a glow. A little softer edge there. Good morning. Good morning. Trying to bring us to an effective close. That was good. I don't even know if the difference shows up on the camera, but definitely feels better to me to do what I'm doing here. I do this with like an airbrush on the computer between layers a little bit. Kind of pushing that back a little bit. Pulling this forward. Those edges right over there now. Take a minute to move away from them. Oof. What do we think? Take this up this way. I think that one magnet's holding up pretty good over there on the left. So, I mean, maybe like these edges here. Goes up a little bit, I guess. Okay, here. What does my dog think? That's what I want to know. He's like, I think I'm going to sleep real good today. Under my person's feet. Clean up these edges. One of the fun things about for me painting, like especially when I'm kind of refining it, like it starts to feel real. I mean, it feels intense the whole time. It's like I'm trying to like lock in like a specific thing. And it's just like it feels really intense a lot of the times. And you kind of, as you work on your work, you kind of gain a sensitivity to what's happening and what's possible. And so it becomes kind of a subconscious thing, even though like I do a lot of stuff try to do a lot of stuff very consciously, but but there's still kind of this subconscious element as I clean things up and get them like exactly where I intend, and it's getting the effect that I'm looking for finally. It's really exciting. As much as I enjoy all the process of making something, even the parts that get frustrating. That feels much better over there. I'm glad I put that little bit of stuff up there. That feels much, much better. So, what I might do, I might pull the tape off today, and that'll kind of let me give me a clearer vision of it. But I think we're going to go ahead and call it there for this morning. Appreciate everybody that came in, and we'll talk to you all later.